Hello, and welcome to the LawCast, brought to you by the Law Factory, who provide a tailored and comprehensive legal accounts service for solicitors and their firms. The LawCast is where we discuss legal news, changes within the legal profession, and provide tips, tricks, and recommendations to help you run your firm.
Hello and welcome to the LawCast. This is episode 1. This is where we discuss changes within the legal profession, provide tips and tricks and recommendations for helping you run your law firm. And joining me today is Ian Johnson from Hazlewoods. Ian is a partner in the legal team, and he's a specialist in SRA Accounts Rules and Compliance. And today we're going to be talking about various things. Main topic is going to be the SRA consultation that's out for minor rule changes and amendments, and more importantly, we're going to be looking at how they affect the SRA Accounts Rules. So, hi Ian, welcome.
Hello. Thank you very much.
No worries. As I said, we're just going to have a chit chat around these subjects, and perhaps Ian, you can sort of like tell us a little bit more about yourself, a little bit more about Hazlewoods and your team there.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Alex. Thanks for inviting me along to this. This is deadly exciting stuff. I think this is the first time I've ever done a podcast. So
nice.
I've done plenty of boring people face to face, but never actually done one of these. I was saying just before we kicked off, I listened to a fair few podcasts, but I think the ones I listen to are slightly more grown up in nature. So I've been told by Alex not to swear. No profanities allowed, not allowed to rip the SRA to shreds or anything like that. So hopefully this will be very family orientated, but also with a very technical edge to it. So sorry, what was I doing? Oh yeah, introduction to me. So I'm Ian Johnson, partner in the legal team at Hazlewoods. Any of you that don't know who Hazlewoods is, we're a firm of accountants, top 30 firm of accountants, about 600 of us in the organisation, but I'm part of the legal team here, and we're called the legal team not because we're lawyers, we're all accountants or tax advisors, but we specialise in advising law firms. So all of our clients are solicitors. All we deal with all day, every day is law firms. I think we act for about 200 firms on a recurring basis, and don't know how that carves up to individual solicitors. I think there's something like 1,200 individual solicitors that we act for. 50 of us in the team, doing everything
big now.
Yeah. Gosh, yeah. We've been growing exponentially, actually. If you invite me back next year, there'll probably be about 600 of us just in our team. But we do SRA Accounts Rules stuff, audit stuff, management accounts, all of that stuff that you expect from accountants. But like I said, that's what we specialise in. So hopefully gives us the edge. We know what we're talking about.
Yeah. Are you still based in Cheltenham? Is the head office still there?
Yeah. It's based in Cheltenham. Head office is technically in Staverton.
Okay.
But most people have never heard of Staverton, so we just say Cheltenham. We've got a few offices now. Got one in Bristol. Just opened one up in Bristol.
Oh, excellent.
A couple of months ago. So
we're spreading out countrywide then.
Yeah, we'll be Milan, Paris, Rome, New York. Give us time. We'll take over the world.
Sounds good. Yeah,
absolutely.
Well, it's great to have you. With what we're going to do, we're going to start off by just having a look at some news that's kicked off. Generally, on these shows, we're going to sort of do a little bit of news talk, and then we're going to move into sort of like a main topic. So the first news topic that I've found that I found was quite interesting was it's not the happiest, but it's all to do with complaints.
Let's start on a positive then.
Yeah, it's not a real positive. Yeah. People complaining about things. Hopefully we won't get too many complaints about this show. So we'll have a look at this. Basically, the Legal Services Board have been looking around, and they've said that they're not 100% happy with how complaints across the UK and in British law firms are being handled. They're saying that the client isn't getting the best resolution, and it's not being handled particularly well, to the point that they quite like to have they're putting together things to talk about with the regulators and see if the regulators for the firms can get involved, and trying to make handling complaints much more procedural, which I thought was interesting, because but they're saying that there's a lot of people that are sort of jumping from an initial niggle, I guess, and then jumping straight into legal ombudsman, and people just generally being unhappy with that kind of thing. So yeah, I just wanted to know sort of like what your thoughts are on that. Whether you've come across anything like this before, from the auditing side or anything like that.
I mean, I wouldn't like to say I get complained about ever, but I don't know. I sort of feel sorry for solicitors a bit when it comes to complaints, because I suppose if a case doesn't go a client's way, they'll leap on anything that they can. They'll jump at, fees aren't right. We didn't like the way the case was handled, and it's quite a difficult thing because there is a very defined endpoint. Well, mostly there's a very defined endpoint to a lot of what law firms do, and if it doesn't go client's way, then I can imagine they get jumped on. God, I don't know. From my point of view, we don't tend to see. So, from my point of view as a reporting accountant, we don't tend to see that much in the way of complaints unless it comes up as just coincidentally during our work. But I do spend a lot of time telling firms in the wider picture of financial management, working capital management, that sort of thing. Do tell firms a lot not to sit on quibbles, and even when a client raises an issue verbally, it doesn't have to come in writing. And I think this consultation or whatever it is with the LSSB is looking at that and saying, well, don't ignore verbal complaints, but certainly where a complaint does come in verbally, maybe even informally, just don't sit on it. From the point of view of the firm, clearly a fee earner, partner, whatever, ignores a verbal complaint, then it can quite easily escalate. But also the wider picture, client says, well, I don't like the size of this bill. Fee earner immediately files it under the too difficult to deal with thing and doesn't do anything for 2 months. By which time it's a much bigger problem, much more difficult to get an easy resolution. So I suppose in some ways it's a bit of a no-brainer. Get the easy wins. Don't ignore the easy wins. Whether or not the whole thing needs overhauling, don't know really. I would say some firms are great at dealing with complaints. Some firms probably aren't as great.
Because it could feel a little bit like a sledgehammer to crack a nut, but because the thing I picked up on was firstly that they would like it to be, initial verbal complaints to be dealt with it at fee earner level. So the fee earner actually handles it because they have the relationship with the client. But then it kind of like jumps and they're saying, well, look, we want to get the regulators involved. And it makes you think, well, okay, well, are we about to see some sort of rule implication or a rule amendment which basically dictates how firms should deal with it? Or are they going to put in like policies and things and say, right, we want to see what your policies are on like an annual basis or something?
Yeah, maybe. I hope they don't go too heavy-handed on it, because I think by and large firms probably aren't too bad with it. I'd hate firms to feel they're being attacked. There's so many ways,
I agree,
so many directions firms get attacked.
And the solicitors, they work so hard to look after their clients as well.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like always the number one thing on their mind is the client okay all the time. So.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, I think we can definitely keep an eye on that one. See where it's going.
See where it goes. I think we're going to hear about it in, certainly before the winter. I think something's going to come of this. And I imagine there'll be various webinars and things happening before long.
Oh well, look forward to those. We all have a webinar, don't we?
So that was the first news story, and yeah. So, but I do have another news story which is a lot more positive. It's a lot more a happy story.
No complaints this time, then.
No complaints this time. It certainly shouldn't be. So. There's an aspiring barrister out there who's his name is Lewis Dean, and Lewis Dean has had in his own words, he's had a bit of a traumatic beginning to his life, and he's sort of struggled through various things. He lost his mother early in his earlier years with she unfortunately lost the fight to cancer, and he's had a very difficult upbringing in care and various things. But he took the decision that he wanted to be a barrister. He wanted to push to be a barrister, and the only way that he could do it, because of government funding doesn't take you to that final bar level, the final year. He's set up a fundraiser. He set up like a Kickstarter, and he's on a GoFundMe, and he needs 16 grand is his target. And thus far, he's at the time of recording this, he is at £12,500, which I think is amazing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And he's getting funding from everywhere, and there's various articles that have been thrown up. If you just do, I will put a link to both the topics we spoke about today in the description box below. But if you're interested in helping him reach his target of 16,000 to pay for his final year and be a member of the bar, then please do so, because it's a really good news story, I think.
Sounds great. I'm a big fan of breaking down barriers. Certainly can't stand elitism or anything like that. I'm certainly a big advocate of things like apprenticeships. I'm not that that's what this is, but any way that anybody can find to break down barriers that are systemically there, stopping people being able to do this, irrespective of what their background is, then great, good for him. Let's donate. Get the link in there. Don't know how long it's going to take for this podcast to come out. He might have hit £1 million by then.
It could well have. It could be well over by the time people see this.
Yeah, but, he might decide to retire instead.
Yeah, that's it. So I'm really pleased. So yeah, Lewis, congratulations on making yourself aware to everybody, and great to everybody who's donated so far. It's really good news story.
Well done, Lewis.
So this sort of like brings me on to sort of our main topic, which is the reason why we asked Ian to join me today, and that's the new consultation from the SRA. So the SRA brought out a regulations minor amendments consultation. They brought it out on the 14th of December last year, and they put it out to everybody to consult on, and people to reply and say what they thought about the amendments and stuff like that. The consultation was closed on the 8th of March, and we're going to basically focus on the SRA Accounts Rules amendments that were put out there. And a lot of this is wording changes, and making things a bit clearer, because Ian, as well as I do, being in the game for such a long time, that the SRA, when they brought out the rules were in a big thick book, and you had to spend days flicking through and making notes and all this kind of stuff. And
I miss the book.
You missed the book.
Not because I like the detail, but it was great. We got to give our work experience people something to occupy their time. Go away and read the rules. It'd take the best part of a week to get through them. Not so much anymore. Sorry, carry on.
Just in time for the next edition to be released, and then you do it all again.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Well, the rules they've trimmed the fat, shall we say, on the rules now. And I think back when they did it a few years ago, I did an article on it, and the title of the article was "From a Book to a Pamphlet," which wasn't me being flippant. It was very much a case of me saying they've trimmed the fat, and it's much more sort of concise, and probably I think they've allowed people to use an element of common sense in how they operate. I think with the new rules,
risky.
But
assuming we've got common sense.
Yeah, they're not quite as prescriptive as they were. But I think with this new consultation, I think they've found areas, haven't they, where they think we could have been clearer here, or we could have been clearer there, and we just want to kind of like, it feels like they're trying to sort of clarify certain points from the original.
Oh, certainly. Yeah, I don't know when these first came out. I still refer to them as the new rules.
Yeah,
they've been around for 4 years, almost 4 years now.
Exactly.
Anyway, Yeah, so when these when the rules came out, I know the SRA's view was, look, now the rules are here because we trimmed them so much. We spent so long actually getting down to the principles and getting rid of all the dead weight that went with them.
Hmm.
Their view was very much, look, now the rules are here. This is how they're going to stay. They have tweaked them a bit, haven't they? It's not like the old ones. I remember when the 2011 rules came out, and then they started dropping landmines into the middle of it,
Oh
and,
yeah.
and the whole thing was just look, it was completely unrecognizable by the end
Yep.
of it. None of that now, but they are tweaking a few bits and bobs, which of course is what this consultation is all about, isn't it,
Yeah.
Alex? It's just making those tweaks to, should we say, the more controversial bits, the less
Yeah.
popular
Well,
bits.
the first one, I mean, just Amendment 1 was Rule 2, which we were talking about with regard to client money, and sort of removing any ambiguity as to whether we are allowed to transfer from client to office before the work's done, because it was so the way that it was worded originally was quite left it a bit ambiguous, didn't it?
I left it open. It basically left a load of firms with a potential loophole,
Hmm.
the size of my house,
Yeah.
that said, oh, I haven't got a big house, by the way. That didn't sound like I was showing off. It was a loophole the size of
Your
a house,
castle.
any generic house that you want to look at. It was a loophole the size of that. They basically left it open for firms to say, well, do you know what? The rules only say that if I want to take money into the office account to pay for a bill, I've got to raise a bill. It doesn't say about you got to do the work.
Hmm.
So, okay, 99% of firms stayed sensible and said, I'm going to do the work first. But there was the rogue, I suppose, 1% that said, oh, do you know what? My cash flow is not looking so good. Let's raise a bill before we've done anything and take the money into the office account.
Yeah.
Especially where they were getting where they were getting fees on account. It
Yep.
just opened the door for that. So, yeah, part of this consultation looked at closing that generic house size loophole a bit, didn't it?
Yeah. And I think there was also, it raised the issue about fixed fees and agreed fees as well,
Mm,
because a lot of firms would argue, yeah, it's a fixed fee, so I can transfer the money over. And you're sitting there, and you go, hang on, we've now got to hark back to a few years ago when the whole fixed fee and agreed fee debacle was huge, and we said,
yeah.
well, look, a fixed fee doesn't mean that you can have the money straight away. Like you have to have completed the work on a fixed fee because that money should still be protected by the client account before you move it
Yeah.
over, as opposed to an
Yeah.
agreed fee, which is very much a case of, well, you don't have that with an agreed fee, and it's actually office money. You shouldn't really go in the client account at all.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what this does effectively, this part of the consultation, it just takes away any element of confusion. Or
Mm.
by element of confusion, I really mean any element of potential exploitation.
Uh-huh.
So it's just saying, look, be sensible. You got to do the work. If you want the money, do the work first, then bill it.
Yeah.
Don't just bill it. So yeah, I mean, to me, I think it's absolutely absolute no-brainer. I don't know of any firms, because there was the guidance, wasn't there? Whenever it came out, October 2020 or something, somewhere around then, the guidance around taking money for costs that the SRA put out there, and it did say, look, you shouldn't take money in advance, but if you absolutely have to, then you've got to make sure your client is fully aware of the risks of you putting the money
Yeah.
in the office account before you've done any of the work. Now, I
Yeah.
don't know any firms that did that.
No, I don't.
It seemed like such a crazy thing, because on the one
Hmm.
hand, the SRA was saying, don't under any circumstances do this, but actually, if you do have to do it, then tell your client that their money's unprotected. So,
Hmm.
it's bonkers. So thankfully, this gets rid of all of that as well. Touch
Yeah.
wood.
Yeah, it's definitely help, and I think it gives overall better protection to the client. Really, I think
Mm,
it's, because that money is protected and must stay there. So
yeah.
yeah, I definitely agree. And the next one was Amendment 2 for Rule 4, and that was money being transferred for disbursements without raising a bill first. Now
Yeah.
this one I struggle with a little bit in certain aspects with this one, because as people watching this podcast know, I work for the Law Factory with legal cashiers, so we're all about procedure, making sure things get done in the right order, making sure things allocate properly, and all this kind of stuff. I can kind of see the logic behind it, and if you're running a file and you spend money, but you're not ready to do a final bill yet, but you want to be reimbursed for that, then I totally understand you wanting to get the money back into office account. For me, though, the difficulty lies with with VAT, and this is something where you have the SRA on one side saying that's all right, you can take the money to reimburse yourself because you've told the client what it is. The client's specifically paid you for that purpose, therefore you can take that money before raising an invoice. Totally get that. But on the other side, you kind of got HMRC, and I'm sitting there saying, well, okay, you also need to think about what account system you currently use and how it deals with VAT on disbursements, because quite often they're different. And many systems that we use, the VAT is applicable when you raise the invoice. So if you just transfer client to office, you may be out of balance one way or the other, and it's going to cause a problem. So from a logistics and a VAT point of view, this one I think could be quite tricky for firms.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. No, I think absolutely. There's so many elements to this that I think are open to interpretation. And I reckon you and I could probably get into a debate about this, and I reckon you and I could probably come up with different stances even, because so VAT, absolutely right. That's a problem, or a potential problem. If firms just say, well, we're not going to raise a bill, we're going to take the money, we've paid for this expense, we're going to take the money into the office account. It's going to create a problem somewhere down the line, absolutely. And that's a problem that you're very much alive to, because you are, I think it's fair to say, at the cold face when it comes to this sort of thing, aren't you? To me, the wider debate gets opened up around, well, what does paid mean? I think, and this is why I feel that probably you and I could be at odds sometimes on this. To you, paid is a very binary thing. It's paid. It's either paid or it's unpaid. Incurred doesn't really come into it. To me, I don't know how much I want to push the boundaries, but if a firm pays for something on, let's say, a monthly standing order, a monthly account, then to me, paid and incurred are the same. They've incurred it, they're going to pay for it at the end of the month. It's just logistically they've got an arrangement whereby they only pay this bill once a month. So the physical act of paying it doesn't really matter. That they've effectively paid it at the point at which they've incurred this disbursement. Search fees, for example. What about, though, and please feel free to shoot me down on this one, what about a firm that incurs a disbursement and posts it onto its purchase ledger? Because when you're looking at an office ledger, that's going to show as being paid, isn't it? Coming at it from the reporting accountant's point of view, it's going to look like it's been paid, because what happens then when they physically pay it, that's happening well away from the office ledger. That's happening in the purchase ledger, in the nominal somewhere. So to you, or from your point of view, at what point do we say incurred is paid? Because to me, as soon as a firm has put it on its purchase ledger and it's ready to pay it, as a reporting accountant, I feel that is paid.
That's
What
an
do you
interesting
think?
question. So, I mean, from a procedural perspective, from our point of view, if you've got a disbursement, let's call it, I don't know, court fees are usually a pretty good one, because court fees say generally firms these days use a PBA account, which is a direct debit. It goes out once a month, once a week, however you set it up with the HMCTS. Now, generally, what we would say is that if you've got court fees, you could put them on as, the way around it, you could put them on as an anticipated disbursement, which basically then puts them as a liability. However, the issue that you have is that if you transfer from client to office, you're going to be transferring against what is technically an unpaid disbursement. Yes, you've incurred it, definitely, and it's going to be going out. And you could argue from a compliance perspective that you've incurred it. It is going to be debiting in a week's time, and therefore you're at the mercy of when the court decides to take the money. So the risk is a lot lower. So I totally understand that. You could potentially do the same as something like land registry. But I would be looking at, really, if I wanted to belt and braces it, I'd be wanting to look at making sure that there's a build as well, so that you're actually paying for it against against technically what is a cost invoice, and then transferring against that. And then you've gone belt and braces, and you've notified you've kind of got a written notification to the client, which is what they want anyway. It's billed for, so it's properly accounted for in your debtors, and you've got a liability there waiting to go out. And you've got that really nice procedure. It shows really good control over everything. And because every system worth its salt will be throwing warnings up at you saying you haven't paid this disbursement, so you'll know. But generally, my understanding from the rules is that I think it's in Rule 4.4, they say that it's about money that has been spent. And they specifically say spent. So from me as a cashier's perspective, spent means it's spent, it's out of the account. It's not incurred, it's paid.
It's gone out of the bank account.
So really, because it generally what happens with a lot of firms, certainly with disbursements, general disbursements, like council fees, for example, you can put an anticipated disbursement on, say it's 2,000 plus VAT, put an anticipated disp on, you then you bill that disbursement, client pays you week later, you transfer and you pay the disbursement out pretty much same day, and that way you stick with the promptly rule effectively. And that works really, really well. I think where people are going to get stuck are these ones like you've mentioned here, where you've incurred something, i.e. a court fee or a land registry or something like that. That's where people could become a bit stuck. I think especially, and one I highlighted in the office last week, just going back to VAT for a second, is the VAT on land registry, and the fact that when you pay, because court fees is different. Court fees, you don't have VAT on a court fee, but land registry, you have to apply it even though you haven't paid it or reclaimed it rather. So it's a case of, well, look, okay, if you're going to take the whatever it is, whatever your land registry is, your 12s, your 6s, all of those searches, are you going to apply? How are you going to apply the VAT at the time of transferring the money over? Are you just going to transfer the net and then bill it later, and then accrue the VAT later? How's that going to work? So whatever you do, you're going to be adding tricky processes into whatever it is you're doing at the moment.
Yeah, so it really need to be alive to the procedural issues that whatever policy it is that firms choose to adopt, procedurally it has to work for them. Because it's easy for me to sit here as somebody remote or a couple of steps removed from the procedures to say, well, theoretically it works, but when you're at the cold face trying to get this through and then thinking about VAT and everything else and invoicing that goes with it, then it's a big concern. It does make me wonder, and I'm aware we're probably running well over on time just on this point, but I'm well aware, or rather, I do wonder whether in changing this rule, to us it looks like a fairly minor change, but I wonder to what degree the SRA end up having to update guidance and then release further guidance to support this. Just because I think talking between you and I, it's already clear there's not confusion, but areas for potential interpretation or misinterpretation.
I agree. Or putting a system in place and thinking, oh, this is a really good solid system, but perhaps not thinking a little bit wider than just getting the money over to cover the disbursement. I think it's important, and I think they are going to have to put extra guidance out there. And I think at some stage, certainly when it comes to VAT and stuff, I don't know whether they can do this, but they're going to have to link up somewhere the actions taken with the liability that is likely when it comes to the VAT, because you don't want a situation where a cashier is sitting there saying, well, I followed this system so that we could have this money, but now I've got the HMRC breathing down my neck. What's going on?
Yep, absolutely. Do you know, I bet nobody has ever framed clients' own accounts in such a positive way as we've just managed to do by talking about this. Who would have thought that the ending on clients' own accounts would be like sorbet to this conversation.
Well, it's actually kind of a bit like earlier. This client own account change is actually a good news story, I think. So yeah, the amendment to Rule 10. Whereas, and I remember calling you about this when back in December when this first came out.
Yes, I remember that. Yes,
they originally said that yes, you operate a client's own account, but they want it reconciled every 5 weeks. And it all felt like it needed to be like a formal reconciliation of kind of everything every 5 weeks. And solicitors and COFAs kind of looking at this thinking how it's not feasible, because for those just to clarify, client's own account is where the solicitor effectively has like a power of attorney essentially over their client's account, because their client is unable to make the decisions or unable to operate it themselves due to maybe health reasons or otherwise, and that's the reason why they take control of it and make sure that things are paid when they're supposed to be paid, etc. And it has to be done through that account rather than their own client account. But they've altered it slightly, haven't they? They've said that it's now 16 weeks.
Or they've consulted on altering it slightly.
Consulted on altering it. Sorry,
I don't think
you're right. It's consulted on altering.
Do you know what? By the time this gets released, they might have actually not consulted on it, and it might have become law.
Well,
but
when I was I was on an ILFM chat recently with Jatinder Loyal from SRA. I think you know Jatinder.
Oh yeah, no. Well,
had a good chat with him, and he was explaining that this particular one, the other two amendments that we've spoken about already, they're pretty happy with what they've got back on those. But I believe
they were until we started talking about them.
But I believe this particular one, they're taking a little bit longer over to try and get it right. Is pretty much the gist of what I got.
Yeah. I've got a view on this. So
okay.
when you said this is the good news story,
okay,
there was a wry smile. Yeah, yes. Brace yourself. No, it is good news overall. We all know that the monthly reconciliations, they were never going to work. We've been in a position where for 3 years now, firms have been kind of shrugging their shoulders and saying, don't really know what to do, therefore I'm probably going to do nothing, which is the worst place to be, because they know they're a client's own accounts, but because it's just too difficult to reconcile them, and there was some guidance, but it didn't really help that much. Firms just said, don't know what to do, I'm going to ignore them. Not great. So from that point of view, yes, I think this is good news. Where I think this falls apart slightly, not falls apart, but where it becomes a little bit difficult for me to be comfortable with, with my auditor's hat on, my reporting accountant's hat on, it's the need that these things now, if they can't be reconciled, well, in fact, the word reconciliation has been removed, I think, from the rule completely. It's been replaced with the need to just keep a record of any transactions originating within the firm, and checking those once every 16 weeks and getting the COFA to sign off on them. So with my auditor's hat on, I've got a problem, because how can you be satisfied as a COFA or an auditor that that's a complete record of transactions if you're not doing a full reconciliation? The only way you can ever be certain that a record of transactions is complete is if you've got something to reconcile them against. In this case, or in normal cases, a bank reconciliation.
A balance.
If you just present a balance, if you're just presented with a list of transactions and said, there you go, that's the full list, well, you can say, okay, well, it looks like a fairly full list, but how do I know? How do I know there's not something missing off there? How do I know that that payment on the bank statement that you've not listed had nothing to do with you? And that's my fear. I don't know any COFAs who would feel 100% comfortable signing off on that, because I think the rule says now, where is it? It's up on a screen somewhere, but I think the proposed new rule says that the COFA signs off once every 16 weeks to say, this list of transactions agrees, but agrees to what? Is it complete? Is it incomplete? So that's my big problem with this. I think also what that list of transactions looks like is open to debate. I think firms will come at this in lots of different ways. There'll be firms that choose to leave it on ledgers like they have in the past, and that's fine. But again, is there a reconciliation taking place? Is it going to be an Excel spreadsheet? I don't know.
I think it will be. I think it will be
Yeah.
a manual. They'll create almost like a manual cash book, and it'll end up being a register of entries that the firm has made, and hopefully that firm will have all of the source information to back up that register, which then links to a bank statement. But as you say, the issue then comes, it's like, well, okay, all of those entries that you've listed on your cash book matches the sum of the entries that we find on this bank statement, but not all of them.
Yeah.
It begs the question, doesn't it? Okay, well, what about the others? Did you not make any of the others?
There, yes.
And that's and because you haven't got a balance to wreck it to, then it becomes difficult. And I imagine this is probably why they're spending a little bit of extra time just trying to get this from right.
Trying to tie up the loose ends. A lot of loose ends. It's left a lot of things open. I mean, from my point of view, I've seen a lot of firms struggling, not even at the stage where they're recording transactions, but actually keeping that central register of these accounts. A lot of firms I don't think have really got a handle on how many individuals in their firm are signing off on these clients' own accounts. So let's get to that stage first.
Yeah.
Let's get comfortable with that, and then let's see what we can do about it. I don't feel we're much closer to being in a position where everyone's happy, given these are probably the highest risk accounts that any firm could ever operate. And I still feel we're a little way off having a happy position. What that happy position should look like, I've got no idea. It's easy for me to sit here giving the SRA a hard time, and I apologize if anybody from the SRA is watching this somewhere off in the future. I do apologize. We all get on famously, but I'm not going to say that I am the one that can fix this, because I don't know what the perfect situation is, and I think they've got a difficult job, and I do feel for them.
Yeah, definitely, because ultimately it all comes back to the COFA and the solicitor's practice at the end of the day, because that's where the risk lies. If you're not compliant, that's where they come to. So, yeah, I agree. It definitely needs to be modified and agreed, and it wouldn't surprise me if this particular aspect could go on a little bit longer. And
maybe what needs to happen is that there is no modification to this. The way it's been consulted is how it's going to be. But until an unfortunate COFA falls foul of an investigation from the SRA and gets hauled in front of the Solicitors Disciplinary Tribunal, or whatever happens because they've not been handling it, maybe that's what it's going to take.
That's the trigger
to make people take it seriously. Because it does need to be taken seriously.
It does, definitely. I mean, at least, the very minimum should be having that central register. I mean, every COFA should be at the end of every, if they operate any client's own account at all, they should have a register. 16 weeks, fair enough, but I would be pushing to still try and link at least the register with your monthly compliant accounts that you do with your client account every month, and just say, right, okay, here's a client account, matter listing, etc. Right, where's the current list of client-owned accounts that we operate, and more importantly, who operates them, who's actually signed up to sign stuff off on these bank accounts, so that we know who's responsible at the end of the day. So that's like bare minimum requirement every 5 weeks. Personally, I think.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, great. Well, those were like the main parts of the consultation that we've that the SRA have put out. There were other changes to other areas, but as neither Ian or I are part of legal practice, shall we say, we're more on the COFA side of it. We're gonna stick to just those.
What you're saying is we're not smart enough to understand the rest of the things that are in there.
Well, we do numbers, not words. You know that.
That's right. Yeah. Became far too complicated, so we didn't bother reading any further.
So that was the main topic. So yeah, we're sort of like coming to the end of the episode 1, end of the first podcast. So thanks, Ian, for joining me. Just wanted if there's anything you'd like to tell viewers and listeners about Hazlewoods itself and things you've got coming up.
Well, no, I'm pretty sure I bored everybody with the preamble, but yeah, just bear us in mind. I'm a reporting accountant, sign off about 100 accountants reports personally every year. I only qualify the really bad ones. But yeah, we know what we're doing. Like I said, we work with law firms all day, every day, 50 strong team now, and we just know law firms inside out. So please do bear us in mind. But thank you very much, Alex, for the for the opportunity to
My pleasure.
debate these things over a cup of tea.
That's all right. That's what it's all about. I mean, yeah, and I dare say we'll be doing it again in the not too distant future. So yeah, it won't be. It's the first, but won't be the last time I'll haul you on here.
Oh, good.
So, so yeah, this has been episode 1 of the LawCast, brought to you by the Law Factory, where we're your legal cashiers. More information can be found out about the Law Factory at thelawfactory.net. So please go and have a look there. If you like it, then like and subscribe, all that usual stuff, and all the links to the new SRA Accounts Rules consultation and the news links will be shown in the description below. I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank you, Ian, for joining me for this coffee chat about the new SRA Accounts Rules, and no doubt I'll see you at plenty of events very soon.
You certainly will. Thanks, Alex. Thanks, everyone.
Take care. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
You have been listening to the LawCast, brought to you by the Law Factory. Why not subscribe to our Spotify and YouTube channel and head to thelawfactory.net for more information.